Bad Day at Riverbend, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. Riverbend was a quiet little town, just a couple dozen buildings alongside a dusty road that led nowhere. Though the stagecoach occasionally rolled through the town, it never stopped because no one ever came to Riverbend, and no one ever left. It was the kind of place where one day was just like all the rest. But one morning, Chef Ned Hardy stood in front of the Riverbend jail and saw something he'd never seen before. A brilliant light in the western sky. It lasted a few minutes, then faded away. Sheriff Hardy went into the jailhouse. He was sitting quietly at his desk, wondering what the strange light meant when the loud pounding rattled the jailhouse door. The sheriff opened it up and saw Owen Buck, the blacksmith boy, breathing so hard he could barely speak in between gasps. Ned Hardy heard the words, "Stagecoach," and something awful. The sheriff followed on outside. The coach had never stopped in Riverbend before, but now it stood motionless at the end of the street. A crowd gathered around it, but held back as if they were afraid to get too close. It was easy to see why. The horses were covered with great stripes of some kind of shiny, greasy slime. "What is it, Sheriff?" someone asked as Ned Hardy stepped up to the coach. He didn't know. It was the strangest thing he'd ever seen, the strangest thing anyone had ever seen. The horses were nervous and breathing hard. They looked terrible. Their smooth white coats, scarred with the strange stuff and hung from them in loopy ropes, were stuck out like some wire. The sheriff grabbed a piece with both hands. It was slippery. He gave it a pull, and the horses jerked away and whipped in pain. Whatever it was, it stuck to them as sure as their flesh. "Where's the coachman?" Sheriff Hardy asked. "Gone somewhere." The coach came into the town without him. Ned Hardy wasn't sure what to do. He scratched his head. "Well," he finally said, "guess I'll go look for him." The sheriff rode out of the town, following the wagon's trail west. Before long, he stopped. The ground was covered with the same marks that were on the horses. What had happened here, he didn't see any sign of the driver, but he heard a muffling sound. Ned Hardy got off his horse and discovered the coachman sitting on the ground behind the rock. The poor man looked awful. He was covered with the greasy slime. Thick stripes of stuff ran across his eyes and mouth. He couldn't see or speak except to mumble. The sheriff helped the coachman up and led him to the horses as they rode together back towards Riverbend. Ned Hardy heard the sound of thundering hoofbeats. He rode to the top of the ridge and looked down on a charging herd of cattle, many marked with the same awful slime that covered his poor saddlemate. When he turned his horse back towards town, he saw the same bright light in the sky he'd seen that morning. It was just beyond the horizon, right above Riverbend. It didn't last long. As he approached Riverbend, it was clear to Ned Hardy, even from a distance, that something terrible had happened. Right into town, he could barely bring himself to look at the building, now covered with the hideous marks and stripes. The sheriff got out of the saddle. The town looked deserted, but when he passed the hotel, someone called out, "Sheriff!" Ned Hardy helped the coach driver down and led him to the hotel. The townspeople and some cowboys were gathered inside. A few were covered with this greasy slime. They all told the same story without warning. The sky overhead had filled with a brilliant light, a light that froze everything it touched. Herds of cattle, even birds in the sky, and it was blinding. "Like stepping out of a prairie and looking straight into the sun at high noon," one of the cowboys said. "Couldn't see a darn thing." When the light passed, they were covered with the greasy marks. "What are we gonna do, Sheriff?" someone asked. "We can't spend our lives hiding here." No, Ned Hardy said. No, we can't. He walked outside and stood in front of the hotel. His bravery inspired the others, and they joined him there. They looked at their poor town. Pretty little Riverbend was now too ugly for words. Look, someone shouted, pointed at the sky above the hills just out of town. The mysterious light appeared. Some people ran back inside the hotel, but Ned Hardy just stared at the strange light without blinking an eye. Whatever evil thing has done this is out of those hills, he said, pointing in the direction of the light. I aim to right out there and put an end to it. The sheriff left town with a posse of well-armed men. They followed the trail of light. It wasn't hard to tell where it had been. The greasy streets were everywhere. The man even saw them floating in the sky, but the light they saw also appeared just beyond the horizon. Then they saw the mysterious light shine brightly just over the next hill. The man crawled up the hill, but the light faded away. As they peeked over the top, looking down, the brave cowboy saw something that made them gasp. There was a man standing perfectly still at the bottom of the hill. He was as tall as the cottonwood tree and as skinny as the broomstick, and he looked like he was made entirely out of grease and stuff that now covered the countryside. Ned Hardy was very sure that this long-legged fellow was the case of all of their grease. They had only one chance. They have to get close enough to take a shot at the skinny devil before he used the light to freeze them. They crawled back to their horses. Ned Hardy gave a silent signal, and the posse charged forward. But just as they came over the hill, they were frozen in the bright light that suddenly filled the sky. And then the light went out.